There's a town in the American Midwest that has never been on a map. Not because it was too small to matter, but because the people who built it decided, long ago, that they didn't want to be found. And here's the part that should bother you: they were right to hide it. What happened on that ground isn't something the history books touched, because the people who survived it made sure of that. This is Cursed Ground, Episode 1. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand why some land never heals. Most people think curses are fairy tales, something invented to keep children away from dangerous places. A story told around fires to explain the things that couldn't be explained. But here's what they don't tell you in the history books. Some of those stories aren't stories at all. There are places in this country, actual geographic coordinates you can look up, where something happened so dark, so deliberately buried, that the land itself seems to reject everything built on top of it. Foundations crack for no structural reason. Animals refuse to approach certain fields. Families who settle there leave within a year, sometimes a month. And when you ask the locals why, they look at the ground before they answer. I'm not here to sell you ghosts. I'm here to show you something worse: documented, recorded history that powerful people went to extraordinary lengths to erase. And when you understand what happened on this particular piece of American ground, you'll understand why. The year is 1847. A small American settlement, we'll call it Harrow's Creek, sits on the edge of a river valley in what is now southern Illinois. It's a farming community, around 200 people. German and Irish immigrants, mostly. They came here because the land was cheap. Now, cheap land in 1847 usually means one of two things. Either nobody else wants it, or somebody already tried, and failed. In this case, it was both. What the settlers weren't told, what the land office conveniently left out of the deed, was that the valley they were building on had been a burial site. Not just any burial site. A mass grave. The remains of an entire indigenous community, decimated by a militia raid in the winter of 1831. Pushed into a ravine, covered with dirt, and forgotten, officially. Within 6 months of Harrow's Creek being settled, the reports began. First, the animals. Cattle that wandered into the eastern field wouldn't come back. Not dead. Just gone. The farmers assumed predators, until they found the cattle, all of them, standing in a circle at the edge of the ravine. Not moving. Not eating. Just standing. Facing inward. Second, the foundations. 3 homes built on the eastern edge of the settlement cracked along their foundations within the first year. Not slowly. Overnight. A structural engineer brought in decades later, when a historical preservation team was trying to map the site, said the pattern of the cracking didn't match any natural soil movement he'd ever documented. He wrote in his report, and I'm paraphrasing here, "The damage appears to radiate outward from a central point below the surface." You understand what that means? There's a journal entry, the original is held in a county archive in Springfield, from a pastor named Elias Vaughan, who served the Harrow's Creek settlement. He writes, in January of 1849, that 3 families have already abandoned their homes. He writes that the children of the settlement refuse to play near the ravine. He writes that on certain nights, when the wind comes from the east, the settlement smells of, and this is his exact phrase, wet earth and old grief. That's not a man describing a ghost story. That's a man describing something he cannot explain, in the only language he has for it. Now here's what I want you to actually take from this. Because this isn't just a spooky story, this is a pattern. Every site we cover on this series shares one thing: something happened there that someone powerful didn't want remembered. The curse is often just collective trauma that was never processed. Because the survivors were silenced, displaced, or killed. Soil composition. Bone density. Structural anomalies. Modern archaeology and geology can read the land like a document. What communities covered up, the ground has been quietly recording. We tend to dismiss folklore as embellishment. But oral traditions were often the only form of record-keeping available to communities who were denied access to official documentation. When indigenous communities said, "Don't build there," they weren't being superstitious. They were being precise. Harrow's Creek was fully abandoned by 1856, 9 years after it was settled. The county records list the cause as economic hardship. But the same records show that settlements in identical conditions nearby lasted 40, 50, 60 years. When a place drives people away consistently, across generations, across cultures, that's not superstition. That's data. The most dangerous thing about cursed ground isn't what happened on it. It's the decision, made by someone with authority, to call it something else. Economic hardship. Structural failure. Isolated incident. Every time we accept the sanitized version, we participate in the erasure. And the ground keeps it secret. Until someone decides to look. Harrow's Creek was never rebuilt. The land was surveyed again in 1921, this time by a state geological team. They found human remains at a depth of 4 feet, across a 300-foot stretch of the eastern ravine. The official report was filed. And then quietly shelved. No memorial was built. No acknowledgement was issued. The county deed still lists the land as undeveloped agricultural property. But here's the thing about cursed ground. It doesn't need a ceremony to make itself known. In 2019, a real estate developer purchased the land, with plans to build a residential subdivision. Construction began in March. By June, it had stopped. The developer filed for bankruptcy. 3 of the construction workers quit on the same day. The site supervisor, in his final incident report, wrote that the crew refused to continue after something was found. During the foundation excavation. He didn't specify what. The land is still empty. And somewhere in a county office in southern Illinois, there's an incident report with a blank line, where the description of what they found should be. This is episode 1 of Cursed Ground. Every episode in this series investigates a real location. Real coordinates, real records, real history. That someone decided you didn't need to know about. If this is the kind of thing that keeps you up at night, subscribe. Because we're just getting started. Episode 2 of Cursed Ground drops next week. And trust me, the location we're covering, you've driven past it. Drop a comment below, tell me what state you're in. And I'll tell you how close the nearest cursed ground is to you. I'm serious. They're everywhere.